Hey there, it's AB, and this is Sober News 1. Usually we do a program called Drunk News where we share cocktails and we talk about all kinds of issues. We have a lot of fun. We take our pants off since we do these podcasts from home. We're going to sober up a little and take a more sobering look at the world and geopolitics and economics. No, this is not a joke. It is April 1st, 2020. We are in the middle of a quarantine lockdown from coronavirus, which we will get to. But first, I want to thank our sponsor, which is Intox-Detox. Full disclosure, I actually own Intox-Detox, so I'm promoting my own company. But basically, we make herbal remedies that are clinically proven and they're clinically dosed to actually work. We use patented and proven ingredients to get actual results. Our first product was actually a hangover remedy product. So basically a product that helps to protect your liver, avoid the misery of the morning after drinking some alcohol. We're actually branching out and expanding, but I'll show you a couple of our products real quick. This is Happier Hours. This is our original formula that you take before or during when you're having some drinks, and it helps you to protect your liver and avoid feeling like shit the next day, essentially feeling sick, feeling you might be dehydrated, you might be tired, but you won't feel sick the next morning. That's actually a new label here. It used to look like this, but we've changed the branding, going for a more natural look here, more clinical natural look, which is really what our brand is. The old branding was kind of rock and roll, and people thought, oh, it's a cool look, but it didn't really speak to people in terms of being natural. We have some exciting new products. I do not have it yet to show, but we have a PM product that you actually take before bed. So we call this product Happier Hours. This is the pre-party product. And then we have the one that's the after-party product that you take before bed, which has some herbal anti-inflammatories to help you with inflammation, because alcohol causes a lot of inflammation in your body. So instead of taking over-the-counter medications, which have side effects, you can take the Better Tomorrow's product. So that's the PM product. Also, another new exciting product, in response, not just to the crisis, but I'll explain in a moment. It's called, I don't even have a label on this yet because we're getting it mass produced. I just have my prototypes, but it's called Immune Strong. And the whole purpose is to enhance your immune system. I actually have Lyme disease, and everyone knows me and my friends and family as the resident supplement nerd. I'm the guy that does all the research and tells you what to take for the result that you want to get. So because of my Lyme disease, I take immune enhancers daily because they really help me to prevent the negative effects of the Lyme disease that I have and have had for a while now. So basically, people ask me, because of this coronavirus, everyone's just completely paranoid about their immune system and like what they can do to improve their immunity. And everyone was asking me what to take. So I said, you know what, I'm going to just share with everybody what I take already. And so that's what we did, is we rushed this to production to bring it to market, because it's something that can really help people in the sense that it improves your overall immunity. It's not a guarantee that you won't get sick, but it helps build up your defenses, and with real clinically proven ingredients. And also, should you get sick, God forbid, with a flu or any type of bacteria or virus, it's going to help you to beat it faster. So that's an exciting new product that we are bringing to market now. We also have another new product, which is called Cure. And this is a product that you can actually, it's a powder product as opposed to the capsule products that you can actually add to your cocktails to achieve the same effect. So instead of having to take capsules before and after you drink with our pre and post drinking formulas, you can actually add it into your cocktails by mixing it with a little water, just putting a little tiny bit in each cocktail. You won't taste it. People that have tasted it have said that it actually improves the taste of the cocktail in some cases, and it can literally go into any cocktail. It doesn't mean you're watering down your cocktail. You're just putting a little bit of the antidote in each of your drinks so that you can help protect your liver, as I said, and help avoid the misery of the morning after. So Intox-Detox is the sponsor. That was a long way of saying that, but I want to give you a coupon code that I'm actually going to create that will be worth 30% off your purchase on any of the Intox-Detox products. And that code is going to be Sober News. I'm going to create it immediately after this broadcast. So That way you can go and you can get 30% off anything you want. It'll be good for 48 hours from after when this goes live, which is now. So that's the sponsor. And let's talk a little bit about sort of where we're going, what we're doing. I've never done sober news before. I do drunk news. And, I have some cocktails. I get tipsy. I speak my mind, which I enjoy. But I thought, people might be interested in something a little different, something where, we get a little bit more serious on some of the issues. So my general agenda here is I'm going to drop some headlines on you. I do a ton of reading. I'm a student of economics. I believe everyone should be, because economics is very key to your freedom as a human being. And if you don't believe that, then think about, when someone owns a slave, for example, when today the issue is more of sex slavery and these kinds of things. Well, what is taken away from them? Their economic power to produce for themselves. Someone else is benefiting from their production and not sharing the proceeds. So economics is really key to your freedom in the world as a human being. So it's very important to me. We're going to hit some headlines. I do a ton of reading and research just for my own education. We should always be educating ourselves as we get older, just to keep learning and growing and keep your brain sharp and fresh as you get older. So I'm going to share some headlines and some conclusions. We're going to take a deep dive into some of the issues affecting the world right now. And because I don't want to be all doom and gloom, and there's a lot of doom and gloom going on right now, I'd like to get into some solutions. And, they're not just my solutions. They're solutions from experts in the field. And a lot of what I do is I'm not an expert per se. On the supplement side, developing products, researching ingredients that do things to help your body in a natural way. In that, I'm an expert. But when it comes to economics and geopolitics, I study experts. I read what they say, and I like to connect the dots and explain to people how it all works so that, you can go find sources of information, because we'll get to it. But the media and some of the established sources of information are failing us and have failed us for years. We'll get back to that. So we're going to talk about headlines. We're going to take a deep dive, look at some solutions for Americans and, everyone all over the world to improve your situation. And then we're going to do a quick shot of truth, which I like to do this time around. Since I'm not drinking alcohol, we're going to call it the espresso shot of truth. So I am drinking some coffee here, and we'll get to the espresso shot of truth in a little bit. But let's start with the headlines. So one of the first headlines that really jumped out at me this morning when I got up, I have certain sources of news that I look at. I look at, for example, King World News, which is I find to be really useful. Goldmoney.com, they compile a lot of great news stories about economics and geopolitics. I watch Greg Hunter on USA Watchdog. These are not cranks. These are people who are very established and know what they're talking about. Greg Hunter used to be on CNN when they used to report real news. And of course, they don't have room for a guy like that actually wants to check sources and doesn't have an agenda in his reporting. So I recommend you check out usawatchdog.com and Greg Hunter, because he has some great people on and some great information that you're not going to get anywhere else. You're not going to get it in the mainstream media. But one of the first headlines that jumped out at me was this. It's how Powell and Mnuchin became the duo in charge of saving the economy. Now, this is total BS, and I'm going to tell you why. But it was actually Peter Schiff, who's another one of great sources of information as pertains to economics. Peter Schiff shared this on Facebook, and it caught my eye because it's a New York Times article. And obviously, they're very liberal. They're very, for better or worse. I don't care who you are or what you believe, but a lot of their reporting is very slanted, and they've really lost their edge in terms of being credible in this day and age. And this article shows great proof of this fact, because I don't know what they're smoking, but basically Peter Schiff, in response to this headline and article, says they are not saving the economy, they are destroying it. You don't save an economy with central planning, bailouts, and money printing. Socialism is not the way to save capitalism. So right away, I like this. I shared it. I shared Peter Schiff's quote, and I said I couldn't agree more. We're going to get into those topics more, but I think it suffices to say for now that this headline is absolutely insane. Now, Jerome Powell, is the Fed chairman of the Federal Reserve right now, and Mnuchin is the Treasury Secretary. So obviously, they're very involved in the monetary policy of the United States, specifically at the Fed. And they're the duo in charge of saving the economy. Now, this reminds me of Ben Bernanke, who wrote a book after the 2008 2009 crisis called The Courage to Act, and basically posited himself as this great savior in this crisis when it couldn't be further from the truth. And we'll get more into that, but basically they took a terrible crisis and they papered it over with debt and set us up for an even bigger crisis to come, which I would say we are in now. And we're going to get more to that. But Ben Bernanke has recently come out in the news and said in response to this crisis that it will be, I'm paraphrasing, but it will be like a snowstorm. History will look back on this as a snowstorm. Now, this man is either a complete idiot or he's a liar. He's never been right on anything about the economy. In 2008, 2009, he remarked several times, but famously right before the shit literally hit the fan, that the housing market was not a problem, that it was stable, not to worry about mortgages and mortgage-backed securities. And of course, all of that was wrong. People like him, these economists that they've come from our educational system, they sit in ivory towers and they see the world as systems, and they think economics is a matter of math. Now, numbers, GDP, things like this are a matter of math, but in terms of determining what a free market will do and trying to approximate that, the Fed has never been right, because it's impossible to calculate. A free market is based on billions of consumers choosing products and services based on price and supply and demand, and nobody can articulate that into a formula to accurately really predict anything. And so we'll get back to this, but this is absolutely insulting that this man has been wrong his whole career, and they didn't save anything in the crisis, but yet he has this book which basically positions himself as the world saving hero, when what they really did was set up an even bigger crisis. So that's the first headline. We've also got another one, which is from Zero Hedge, that I found really interesting. And it talks about, it's the COVID-19 tripwire. Now, this is actually from, and I'm going to look at the article here real quick. This is actually from Forrest Gump, is where this idea comes from. When Lieutenant Dan says, you better tuck that in, you're going to get that caught on a tripwire. Now, basically, the whole idea is that this virus is the tripwire. The problems were already pre-existing. And that's similar to where Peter Schiff says that the coronavirus is the pin. Now, it is a real health crisis, so don't get me wrong, but we're focusing for the moment on more of the economic side of things. And I'll talk a little bit more about the health crisis in just a minute. But this is the pin that pricked the bubble. The bubble was already there. It's the biggest debt bubble in human history. So this is the pin that pricked it. And Zero Hedge is calling it a tripwire. Again, Zero Hedge, another great source of information. If you also, like me, feel like you're being lied to by CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, and all of them else who have agendas and clearly have agendas, you can get real information from Zero Hedge that is actually creditable and sourced. So check them out. Great headline there. And I couldn't agree more that this is the tripwire. This is not, the bubble is not the virus. That's not the crisis. It's a health crisis. The economic crisis was already ready to blow up. And the virus is just the pin to prick that bubble. Again, Peter Schiff is a great source of information on that. And so definitely check out his podcast and his stuff. Next, landlords in the U.S. squeezed between missed rent and overdue loans. This is from Yahoo Finance. And they're basically just discussing, how the landlords they're really getting squeezed by this situation. And it's totally understandable. I mean, they're going to give us all $1,200, or for families, I think it's more like $3,000. But what does that really do? For a lot of us, that might be 1 month's rent. Well, clearly this seems like this is going to last more than a month. So what is the daisy chain of effects of, for example, okay, so the government says, well, you don't have to pay your rent or your mortgage. Okay, well, your landlord owns the property based on a mortgage that he must have a debt note on that property. So I guess he's not going to pay his mortgage if you don't pay the rent, right? Because where's he going to get the money? Well, so then who owns the mortgage? The bank owns the mortgage. So that the bank doesn't get paid. So the daisy chain you can see. And in the 2008 crisis, we saw it doesn't take a massive default on mortgages for the whole system to implode. And that would be another fear. And some would say that is already happening. Going back to October, the Fed has been offering these repos, which is just repurchase agreements, short-term loans given to banks. And when banks won't lend to other banks at a reasonable rate, the Fed will step in and loan them money. Well, they've been doing this since October. They've recently upped the daily amount available to $1 trillion a day, which is unprecedented and incredible. And this is happening all around us. So it's all connected. And this daisy chain of defaults could really be a serious problem for the everyday person who can't pay their rent or their mortgage, the landlord who owns that property and can't pay the banks, and then the banks themselves, who obviously, if they don't have their those mortgages serviced, they're bankrupt in some cases. Next, the coronavirus restrictions to continue for a period of months, quote unquote, even as outbreak slows. That's according to the mayor of Seattle. Now, if this goes on for months, and we're going to get into this a little more, this is going to be disastrous for Americans. They say, up to as many as 50% of Americans can't come up with $400 in a crisis to, fix their car or to for health care needs, pay a deductible on a health bill that they need, like a surgery, something major to survive, or maybe they need their car to get to work, but they can't afford the repair to repair their car. So we have a serious numbers problem here, and we'll get into that a little more. But this just goes to show that this thing could go on for much longer than anyone realizes, and that is an absolute crisis. Now, continuing on that theme, this is from Zero Hedge as well. Ford is delaying North American production indefinitely. So Ford, obviously a huge employer, and is a big company, and it's just indicative to me. It's taking the temperature of the economy. Ford is delaying North American production indefinitely. That's a terrifying phrase. I mean, they employ a lot of people, and what are those people going to do? Again, these are the people that can't pay their rent and their mortgages. So, what happens when it goes further and they can't pay for food? Or maybe the supply chains break down and there is no food available. I'm not trying to frighten people, but it's important that we take a sober look at what's going on here. Now, along those lines of manufacturing, also from Zero Hedge, U.S. manufacturing slumps to biggest contraction since financial crisis. So this problem is not only as big as the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, it is much, much bigger because there's so much more debt in the world. There's so much more risk to the whole system because they never fixed the problems of 2008. They papered them over with a bunch of debt, and now that is imploding. And what we have in front of us is a black hole. And they're trying to refill this black hole with printed money. And we'll get into that in just a minute, but it's not going to work. It's a temporary fix at best. And this time it's going to take a hell of a lot of trillions of dollars to fill this black hole. And in the case of a real black hole, you can never fill it because its glut appetite for assets will be will not be able to be satisfied. So that's the fear that I have. Now, there's another article here from Yahoo Finance. It says Fed takes on the role of the world's central bank by pumping out dollars. Now, that's what we're talking about, is that the Fed is going to pump out dollars to basically reinflate this bubble that the coronavirus has popped. And just as the article that started out from Peter Schiff had shared on Facebook about Mnuchin and Jerome Powell, is that these are not the saviors. They cannot save the world by printing money. The U.S. Federal Reserve, first of all, it's not federal, it's not a reserve. They don't have any money. They can only print money. And anything they print are tax dollars. We owe interest on the money they create. And that's a whole other, you could teach a master dissertation class a PhD on just how the Fed makes money and how that works. So that's beyond the scope of what I'm doing here. But it's a very simple thing in your head to realize that the Federal Reserve, our central bank, cannot save the world by printing dollars. That just does not make any sense. And a last article for today to check out is Yvonne von Greyer's, who I love, who's been predicting this exact situation for many years. The headline is "Fake Paper Silver Market plus James Chirk on the next bubble to burst and free market gold." Now, what this article is about is that Greyer's has been predicting this debt bubble for a long time, and he's a big proponent of buying precious metals, so gold and silver, because they're sound money. They have real value. Paper printed dollars and mortgage-backed securities and CDOs and all this paper that they print, it's all based on debt. So it can go to zero. For example, that daisy chain of defaults, it's not hard to imagine all paper assets going to a value of zero. And that even includes the fiat money like the US dollar. So if that happens, people aren't going to want money. What are they going to want? Something of real value. So goods, property, at the very least, even if your real estate is worthless, you can build a house on it. You can shelter yourself. You can protect it. You can buy weapons, guns, and gold and silver to transact with, because people are going to want something real, something of real value. And they have faked these markets by pumping them full of paper obligations. So, for example, the futures market in gold and silver, where they basically just print a piece of paper and it says, "I owe you this amount of gold or silver," but it's not the actual gold or silver. And if you were to cash it in, if everybody were to cash in their tickets for their gold and silver, there wouldn't be enough to go around. And so we are having a really big squeeze right now in the precious metals markets. So the people that want to get their gold and silver are not going to be able to get it. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But trying to buy gold and silver at this moment is almost impossible. Mike Maloney of goldsilver.com, he jokes that that gold and silver are becoming unaffordium and unobtainium. That people are not going to be able to afford to buy it, but it doesn't even matter, because even if they could afford it, it's not available. So let's kind of pause for a second. I'll take a breath, a couple sips of my coffee here. But these headlines definitely show, they paint a picture, and we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive and look a little closer at that picture. I just want to give everybody a disclaimer that I'm what you would call a political atheist. I don't believe in wearing a red or a blue shirt and joining either of these teams. I think they're both corrupt. I think most of them don't care about us. Most of them are millionaires. Most of them have shorted the market before this crisis happened and profited from the crisis. And if they knew about it, why weren't they warning people? Why were they selling all their stocks and buying certain other stocks ahead of time? Well, these are important questions. So I question both parties. I question everything. There are bits and pieces that I like from conservatism and liberalism, depending on what we're talking about, socially, economically. To me, it matters. I don't just toe one party line. And anybody that does, I distrust, because I think it's stupid. We're not red or blue or purple. We're human beings, and we need to think and consider things and question. So that's my primer, is that this is not a political argument. Actually, I think having a political argument in the midst of this crisis is despicable. And I'll get into that in just a second. But I am not here to deny for one moment that we're having a health crisis and that this crisis is real. The virus is real. This always could have happened. This has always happened throughout humanity. Pandemics have always been a threat, and never more than now, because the world is so interconnected globally. People traveling from place to place. We're shipping goods from in between borders. Borders have never been so open before. Now, that's a question. Should it be that way? That's something to talk about. But in this health crisis specifically, I just see it as an outsider. I'm thankfully, I haven't been infected. Nobody I know has been infected, and we're healthy up to this point. But I'm seeing it as an observer, and I'm seeing that It seems like we are severely lacking in truly accurate data as reported by truly accurate and credible people. Now, if you want me to believe the media has long ago, the mainstream media, they've lost their credibility. I'm sorry, they can't have it back. They can't ask to be believed now after all the lies and all the spin and all the crap that they have done within my lifetime. I mean, the average American does not trust the media, and that's the problem. How do we know what to believe? That's one of the huge failures of this is, communicating data, letting us know accurately. We want to know, even if it's bad news, Americans want to know. And on another front, the healthcare front, I mean, what is the biggest determinant of the outcome of an injury or an illness? It's how fast you're able to get the right care. Now, the stories that I'm hearing, and even from personal friends that had to be tested where they couldn't get tested, they had to wait. So if you have this virus, there's no time to wait. You need to mobilize and you need to take action for your health. And if you're having to wait, and in this case, this person had to pay $500 to take this test, and so the medical community, in some sense, has gouged these prices, and it's to a point where it seems fraudulent to me. I mean, it's not right, especially that, let's say he didn't have the $500. Does that mean he can't get tested? And then he's walking around spreading the virus. So that doesn't help anybody. And then the other side of that is, the masks and the ventilators and the treatment and these things. I'm not a medical professional, but I'm looking at a system that is broken and at best very disordered and too slow to save lives. So I have a problem with the data. I have a problem with the credibility of the people reporting the data. I have a problem with the healthcare industry's reaction. Now, the biggest problem involved is that there's a huge contradiction here. We have a healthcare crisis that is very real. We have an economic crisis that is very real. And the spread of the coronavirus and the economic recovery are diametrically opposed. We have to stay in and quarantine ourselves in order to avoid spreading the virus. Yet, the longer we stay in quarantine, the more, okay, we kill the virus, hopefully, and don't spread it, but the more that people suffer economically. I see them as diametrically opposed, these two ideas, and I don't see an exit strategy or how we can actually work together to make this happen. I don't see a plan, and that's my problem. I consider myself a problem solver. I develop supplement products for problems. Hangover is one of the world's oldest problems, right? We developed a product for it. It's a great product. I have lowered immunity due to Lyme disease. I developed my own formula of immune enhancing herbs. Okay, these are problems. I'm not saying they're solved perfectly or forever, but people want solutions to problems. I'm looking at this problem that we're staring into, and I don't see a solution, and that is very terrifying. Now, I don't want to get political at all, but I do want to say this should not be political. Saving Americans is not political. It's not red. It's not blue. It doesn't matter what you believe, what your political party is. We need a solution. And shame on the media and shame on Congress and anyone else that's politicizing this, because that is absolutely despicable. Americans don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, if they're suffering and you have a way to help them. We want to come together as a people, and the media and the Congress and other people are trying to splinter and divide us. That is never going to work. It's only going to further incite our pitchforks against you. And that is what we're going to see, unfortunately. And I hope it doesn't turn violent. And I hope people don't get hurt or suffer or have rioting and crime waves, because that is where we don't want to go. As I said, the media has no more credibility. Tech giants like Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, they're censoring content. We're all getting driven into this pen of social media and internet because it's the only thing we have outside of media and social media. How do we know what's true? I mean, we have hearsay from people we know and contacts, loved ones, friends, and we have these two sources of media, both of which I do not trust. So it's very hard to know who to believe and what to trust. Recently, Ron Paul, who has his Liberty Report, another great source of information you won't get in the mainstream media, Twitter was marking his one of his articles as something that was basically fake news. Now, one thing you can say about Ron Paul, he's liberal. He's a libertarian. He's not liberal. He's very conservative on most economic things. Socially, pretty liberal, and he's pretty open minded socially. But one thing you can say about the man is he's not a liar, and that's why he didn't do very well in Congress. He couldn't get his audit the Fed passed. He couldn't get the things he wanted passed because he's an honest man. And unfortunately, it's a shame when the virtue of honesty is such a negative thing in our government, which it obviously is, because our government is full of power hungry freaks that will do anything to one up each other and to grab more power. But yeah, I mean, marking Ron Paul as a conspiracy theorist or a fake news, I mean, couldn't be further from the truth. I've never known in many years of following him and listening to what he has to say. Doesn't mean I always agree with everything he says, but I've never known him to be anything but as objective as possible and honest. So shame on Twitter and shame on social media for picking sides. I mean, it's the objective spread of information, accurate information is our goal. That's what we should work toward. It just seems like they pick sides and they suppress the side that they don't want to get heard. And you know what? That's just wrong, in my opinion. Look, let's shift a little bit to the economic impact, which is really the main thing that I wanted to dive into. I couldn't not address the political and the health, but the economic impact. This is a real crisis. Okay, I want to preempt by saying I'm not a financial advisor. I compile research. I do research for my own education, as I said, and I help to connect the dots for people. And you know what? Sometimes it's not easy because they're hearing all these fake things from all these different sources that are not credible. The sources that I follow, they're objective, they're sourced. When they're not objective, they clearly state where their affiliation lies, but the information in terms of the economics is largely based on math. So it's not political. So I'm compiling the information and trying to be as apolitical as possible because I don't think the economic solutions should really involve politics. But the real problem here, and the problem for a very long time, is debt. Let's not confuse ourselves. This is the real problem. America has been paying off debt with more debt, debt on debt on debt. It's like a household. You're paying your Visa bill with your MasterCard, and it doesn't work out. You can't solve a debt problem with more debt, as they say. And this is the problem. In 2008, that bubble popped. And this is a bubble that's been popping and reinflating again and again back since Greenspan. And, they had an 87 crisis. They reinflated the bubble. They had the dot-com crisis. They reinflated the bubble. The 2008 crisis reinflate the bubble. This is their plan, is constantly just reinflating the bubble. Now, this flaw in our system goes all the way back to the Fed, and we'll kind of get to that in a second. But the bigger point is that 2008, the shit hit the wall, and they papered all the debt over. They bailed everything out. And it was a huge bailout. They said it was going to be 700 billion, right? The TARP, right? It turned out to be, experts say, as much as $29 trillion that they pumped into this thing to keep it alive. And it's basically like pumping adrenaline into a zombie. The zombie is dead. The corpse, it's dead, but they keep pumping more and more energy into it. And eventually, when does this thing just not get up again? And I think that's where we are, and a lot of these experts do too. Not to mention, on top of 29 trillion they pumped into this thing through swaps and dollar swaps and buying assets and all these things. There's this missing $21 trillion, and people keep forgetting about this. Greg Hunter of USAWatchdog.com reports about this all the time, with the missing 21 trillion. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts are the ones that found this out. And when they found it in the government's own paperwork, in their own accounting, so in GAO stuff. And they found it, and as soon as they brought their attention to it, the $21 trillion missing from HUD and DOD, Department of Defense, They basically said, oh, it's a national security issue. They took the site down, they took everything down, they hid it. They basically made it disappear. And keep in mind that 21 trillion is on top of all the 20 some trillion, 22, 23 trillion we have in debt as a country, our national deficit. That's a separate number. So there is incredible amounts of money that have already been created to do things that the people, myself, we've never approved of. Congress never approved of this stuff. They did a $700 billion TARP. They didn't say it was 29 trillion. They didn't say we were going to be missing 21 trillion of extra dollars. See, there's something called QE, and a lot of people don't know what this is, but it's quantitative easing. This is the money printing that they've been doing since 2008 to try to fix the system. In the history books, I think QE will be huge. It will be a huge turning point in human history. Now, where that human history goes from here is sort of up to us now. And that's why it's really important. But when I say QE to my friends and family, they don't even know what I'm talking about, even though it stands for not billions, but trillions of dollars the US government has created, mostly to bail out banks and big businesses. Now, it just sounds fake, trillions and trillions of dollars that they've created. People don't even really understand it. They don't know anything about it. But if you just look at the facts, it's right there. It's even on the Fed's website. They report, they have close to 5 trillion in assets on their balance sheet, and which assets, let's just call them debt because that's what it is. And so people say, so what? Well, this threatens your children and your grandchildren because we owe this money as taxes. Where do they get money when they create money? They buy assets. And when they create that money, there's interest attached. So we end up owing this money. That's what our national deficit largely is. We owe money to the Fed. We owe money to people that, again, they're not federal, they're not a reserve, they don't have money. All they do is they're a middleman to create the money for the US. Well, that's obviously flawed, but we don't have time to go into all of that. But we are redoing QE again. We had QE1, we had QE2, QE3. Now this QE4, which Peter Schiff and many other people call, and Michael Pinto as well, who's recently on Greg Hunter's USA Watchdog. We're in QE to infinity, and that's where we get into the stimulus and all the money, the $2 trillion. They just came up with this. And it's like every day there's a new multi-trillion-dollar program to bail out this system. This is the QE to infinity, quantitative easing to infinity. Basically, we're going to print money and fix all the problems. The problem is you can print paper dollars. You can print them. It doesn't mean they're worth anything. You can not print goods and services. You can't print more beef. You can't print more gold or silver. I can't print hangover pills. You can't print real assets in the real world. So what you end up with is you end up with more and more paper chasing the assets. So basically, the more paper you print, the less each unit is worth. And in this crisis, because supply is going down, no one's producing anything, no one's working. So now we have a perfect storm of lower and lower value dollars chasing higher priced items because they're scarce. It's just pure supply and demand. So the inflation potential for this QE to infinity is astronomical. And this is an unparalleled crisis. We've never been here before. In human history, we've never had this much debt. We've had pandemics before. We've had depressions before. We've never had anything of this size and scope. So it's truly terrifying. And anybody that tells you that they know what's going to happen is probably wrong, because nobody knows. Nobody's been in this situation before. We have similar situations in history we can look at and say, okay, this is what might happen. This is what could happen. But it is truly an unparalleled crisis. In the US specifically, we have a purely service economy. I mean, I believe it's 70% of our economy is consumer driven. That's people, you and me, going out buying things on Amazon. Okay, we're still doing that, but we're not going to restaurants. We're not going to spas. We're not going on vacations. These services prop up the majority of our economy. They're all closed now. So in terms of a contraction, in terms of GDP, the numbers that we're going to see Again, we're trying to focus on numbers so that we don't get political or emotional about this, but we analyze the actual problem. What does that look like as a contraction? What does that look like as an unemployment number? We had 3 million or so jobless claims in the recent report. Some are saying the next one's going to be 4, maybe 5 million. In the end, we may end up with an unemployment rate in the next few months of 20, 30, 40%, the kinds of numbers that we've seen in the Depression, and maybe bigger numbers than we've ever seen. So this is very worrisome. What are these people going to do? The health crisis is that people could die of the virus, and many thousands have died, and tens of thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands will die. But if we cannot fix this economic issue, millions will go without things, food, essentials. Right now, it's toilet paper. It's a joke. Haha, the toilet paper is expensive. The shelf is empty. What if it's bread? What if it's meat? What if it's milk? These are issues that can happen. And because they have not happened to us in recent history in America, we think it's impossible. We think they're going to fix it somehow. I wouldn't count on it. This stimulus, as I said, it's purely money printed. And basically, they surpassed the QE that they did. QE1, they surpassed all of the amount of QE, the quantitative easing, money printing, in just a few weeks here recently. And it's not stopping anytime soon. There's more and more programs coming. And basically, they've pinned interest rates to zero. This is another huge problem. Interest rates are the price of risk, essentially. The price of risk is never zero. If you have zero interest rates, you get a misallocation of capital. You know, for example, why would you want to invest in something risky when the basically you can invest in something that supposedly has no risk? And for example, with the Fed printing money, they're basically just printing money, buying up all these assets. So you look at the recent history of stock buybacks with massive companies. They're taking debt, which is basically almost zero risk to them because it's zero cost at 0% interest, and they're buying back their own stock. The problem with this is it inflates the stock price. It pays bonuses to the CEOs and the executives of the company, but it doesn't create any more wealth. It doesn't produce any more goods. And so that is a big part of the bubble, the stock market bubble, where all these valuations are just so inflated by all this fake funny money coming into the market. Um, we have to pay interest as debt on this, and if the interest rates were to rise even a little bit with the debt we have now, just our national deficit, just the stated debt, we could not even service our interest on that debt if the interest rates were to rise to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. That's why they have to keep interest rates at zero now forever, which is impossible. I mean, the price of risk and time when you're selling 10-year treasury bonds, the price of the risk over time is not zero. It's actually probably becoming infinite. The risk is infinite and the interest rates are zero. Now, this all goes back to the Fed. The Fed is not federal. It's not a reserve. They have no money. They print money to buy assets. And now, essentially, with this crisis, this pin pricking this bubble, they've decided they're going to buy everything. They're going to bail out everyone. And supposedly they're going to save us. And this, you have to see the problem with this. Again, it's taking on more debt to solve a debt problem. They're going to be buying treasuries. They're basically buying our own national debt. They're buying our treasuries. They're buying mortgage-backed securities, right, to prop up these mortgages that the banks own, which the rents aren't getting paid, so nobody's collecting on that. It's a big problem. They're buying corporate bonds. The corporate bonds are the debt that these companies have taken to buy back their stocks, not to produce more goods, but just to take on more debt. And let's take the money now, party now, and we won't worry about what happens later. They're even talking about buying U.S. stocks, which the government buying the stock of companies directly. The Federal Reserve, that is, not the government, because they're not technically part of the government. They're private banks. They're owned by private banks. But by buying the means of production, buying into these stocks and these companies. I mean, that's basically fascism. And fascism, people get confused. They think of fascism, they think of Hitler and Nazis, and that it has something to do with racism. It has nothing to do with racism. Fascism, as defined, is the merger of the state and corporations. So when the state takes over the means of production, they take over corporations. That's fascism. That's what it is. And so that's where we're going. That's the direction we're going in. And it usually ends in misery. Actually, pretty much always in history. Because again, you can't print real assets. You can print money. Actually, you can't print money. Mike Maloney, goldsilver.com. I recommend you check out his series, Hidden Secrets of Money. It teaches you how money really works, because they don't teach us that in this country. Because if they did, we'd all be really pissed off and we'd overthrow it, probably immediately. Actually, Henry Ford said something about that. Like, if people, I think he said there'd be a revolution by tomorrow, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but check out Hidden Secrets of Money, and you'll learn that what we have is currency, not money. Real money is a store of value. Our currency is not storing any value. Now, if you want any proof, a lot of people say we were having the greatest stock market in history before this happened. Well, if you want any proof, you can look at a stable asset like gold, and you can compare gold to the Dow. The Dow has been crashing in terms of gold for decades. So if you look at a real good against the stock market, if you look at dollars, well, the dollars have been debasing. So that means they're worth less. So even though the stock market is at all-time highs, in terms of a real good like gold, it was actually crashing. It's confusing to think about that way, but if you price everything in gold, you're going to end up with a stable purchasing power instead of something like fiat currencies like the dollar, which go up and down, they float. It's a secret tax to erode the buying power of your currency. Money doesn't do that. Money stores value. So when we talk about all this printing money and people talk about inflation, you have to understand, people think of inflation as the cost of goods, like my coffee. Okay, it used to cost $3, now it costs $4. That's inflation. Well, that's consumer price inflation. Inflation is actually defined as increasing the money supply, which they've been doing, as we said, for a very long time now. And now that's the quantitative easing, printing money. They're putting it on steroids. And so we're putting that on steroids. And the inflation up to this point has gone into assets. So when you talk about the highest stock market prices, values in history, that's where the inflation has gone. Now, I look at things like in consumer prices, I do see inflation in certain places. There's things that I used to buy that are a lot more expensive. I was just saying the other day about almond butter and bacon and goods that we buy in the markets that, the price is different. A lot of people see shrinkflation when they go to the grocery store. They say, well, the package is smaller. I get less product for the same price. That's another form of inflation. They call it shrinkflation. Instead of getting 6 ice cream bars, you got 4 ice cream bars, but you paid the same price. And maybe the ice cream bars, maybe they used to have real sugar, but now they put in high fructose corn syrup, which is cheaper and not so great for you. Do your research. But all of a sudden you're getting an inferior good, you're getting less of it, but at the same price. There's many ways that inflation can manifest in the economy. Asset prices are one, and that's what we've seen. But what we really would hate to see now is, in a time when people are hurting for money, they're not even legally allowed to work in many cases, the prices go up. That is the worst possible time that can happen. And the supply of goods is coming down because nobody's working to produce those goods. You can see how this is a perfect storm. This is an absolute potential crisis when inflation really starts to ramp up and people have less money in general. Now, it's possible we could hit hyperinflation. This is something Peter Schiff talks about a lot. Some people disagree because everyone does a flight to the dollar and to treasury bonds as a safe haven during risky times like now. But eventually, how much money can the U.S. print before it's not worth anything? And we've seen this before in history. People have very short memories. Most of the people that experience the Weimar Republic in Germany, people talk about this all the time. It's trillions of Deutschmarks to get to get basic goods, loaf of bread or a pair of shoes. And in recent history, we've had Zimbabwe, but how many of us have experienced that? I've never been to Zimbabwe. I've read about it, but I didn't encounter it myself, where prices are doubling at an exponential rate, and they just double and double and double to the point where literally you could go for a loaf of bread and it would be $10 trillion. They can't print the money fast enough, and the people can't spend it fast enough, because once you realize that your money is losing value, you're going to try to get as many real goods as you possibly can as quick as possible. That's where gold and silver come in. But I'm going to get to that in just a second, and we're almost done here because I don't want to run this too long. But, the last issue that I really wanted to tackle is the bailouts that they're having. The bailouts are absolutely the wrong solution. Again, they're doing the same playbook that they did in 2008. The banks were too big to fail, so they bailed them out. Even though they mismanaged themselves and they went bankrupt, they got bailed out. They made risky bets and they lost. They got bailed out. I was telling a friend the other day, if you loan money to someone that you knew wasn't going to pay you back and you lost it, should you get bailed out? Should someone make you whole? No, don't loan money to people that are not able to pay you back. That's your liability. You took on that risk. Unfortunately, we did bail them out, and we're doing it again. It started with the repo markets in October, as I mentioned, overnight repurchasing agreements where they lend money temporarily to banks. The Fed opened up the window and basically giving them these loans. And they're, now it's up to they've said up to $1 trillion a day. And what really makes me mad as a consumer is that all these companies that are mismanaged, they didn't save for a rainy day. They're getting bailed out. And the man on the street, $1,000, $3,000 here, basically that's what you get. But notice how before they ever talked about a stimulus package for small business or individuals, they bailed out the banks without even asking us. These repos are backdoor bailouts, and they did that with no congressional approval. Didn't matter. They didn't need to ask us. They just did it. They said $1 trillion a day, it's done. And then these politician assholes go in and they fight over adding these pork and bullshit attachments to this bill to support Americans. And they can't barely grind this thing out to help real Americans. But the bailout of the financial assets is already done. It's already done. It wasn't even a question. So they're repeating all the same mistakes. They're bailing out big businesses, which creates what's called moral hazard. If I'm a gambler and if I am gambling in the casino and I win, I get to keep the money. I lose, somebody comes along and bails me out. Am I ever going to make good decisions? No, I'm just going to make riskier and riskier bets because I know that I'm not going to lose. Heads, I win, tails, you lose. That's what we are saying to our big business and specifically to the financial industry. And it's absolutely wrong. It's morally wrong. And it should not be. And I think we should get angry about it and say, hey, you're going to write a $1,000 check to me. How about taking all those bailouts that you're giving to the banks and to the big industry, and why not really try to help Americans? Now they say they are, but let's see how that goes. Because I don't know about you, but $1,000, a couple $1,000 for the average family out of work for 2, 3, 6 months at a time, it's not going to do shit. It's not going to help anybody. It's an insult. It's actually an insult. And meanwhile, it's socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. That's not capitalism. We're not doing capitalism right now. We're doing crony capitalism. We're doing a fascist system where basically the state and the corporations work together, scratch each other's backs. Everybody else is screwed. And that means me and you. Anyway, free markets usually have the best solutions. I'm not saying that it's always right. I'm not saying pure capitalism, cutthroat, pure capitalism with no concern for the good of the country, the people. I'm not saying that. There are places to bend, there are places to adapt, but the free markets always provide better solutions. So as Peter Schiff says, if you want socialism, you've already got it, because they're bailing all the businesses out, they're giving them all money, they're going to own the means of production. They're basically giving us basic income, universal basic income. They're already doing that right now. So, I mean, you've already got it. You don't need to vote for a socialist because we already basically have that system. Um, on a personal note, I worry myself, I concern myself with not just the people in homes that can't pay their rents, but what about the homeless? What about all the epic numbers of homeless we have now in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, big cities like that, without people on the streets to, donate food and give them money to buy food? What are these people going to do? I mean, do we have a plan? Do we have anything in working for them? I mean, you're going to give the people that are home not working, going to give them $1,000. Okay, yeah, that doesn't do much, but what are we doing for these people? Because we need to do something. Because what will happen is if they get desperate, and I've already heard this from a credible source in New York, that they're getting desperate and they'll resort to rioting and crime if we can't find a way to help them out, because these are people that are already downtrodden. Now, how do you think they're gonna fare during this crisis? Could be really bad. Because I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I'm almost done here. I just want to say, there are solutions to some of these problems, and I'm not going to say that I have the solutions. I'm just saying we need to talk about it as a country. We need to have adult conversations. We need to stop pointing fingers and start fixing real problems. A lot of them are math problems with our economy, but in the short term, we got to get this health crisis taken care of. But solving that actually kills our economy even more. So we have a very complex problem here, and we need to address the health crisis, but we also need an exit strategy to help to save the economy. And it's not bailouts, and it's not a sharing economy. It's not socialism. It's got to be something that actually works in the real world. So credible sources for reliable data. I mean, I don't know what to say about the media. They've lost credibility. It's the boy who cries wolf. I don't believe the media anymore. And so I'm not listening to them. I refuse to. I think that their job is to get ratings, drum up fear, and push their political positions, which they've done a pretty good job of all that so far. In terms of reliable data for health and that stuff, I don't know where to send you, because it's very difficult to know who to trust in this environment. For economics, go to King World News. Go to goldsilver.com, Gold Money, USA Watchdog, Ron Paul's Liberty Report. These are excellent sources of real information that you can get on in terms of geopolitics and economics. And some of the health information trickles through to that, but on the economic front, you can always turn to those. Ultimately, it looks like we need to reset all this debt. I don't see any other way. Obviously, Trump knows a thing or two about bankruptcies, so maybe he will lead our country into the biggest bankruptcy in human history. I mean, it looks like that's the only real solution. I think we should end the Fed. I think we should go in a direction of ending the Fed, stop all this, these bailouts and cheap money for their friends, and screw everybody else, and socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor, because that's really what we have. Crony fascist capitalism. That's what we have. And what we could do is we could allow the Treasury to actually create sound money with no debt attached to it. Then we don't owe interest on the money that gets created. It's backed by something real. I'm not going to say what that should be, but gold and silver have been traditionally the things that have backed things, but it has to be real assets. It can't be things that you can print infinite amounts of. So on an individual level, we need to be more self-reliant. We need to come together. We need to help each other. We need to promote liberty and health and the local community, because communities are what bring people together and get us through these times. Plant a garden, find ways to cut back. At some point, we may get to rationing food. We may have to share. We may have to help each other through this, pull each other up. Buy some gold and silver. I don't even think you can get it anymore, because I own some silver, but people are saying that even though the price on the COMEX says $14 an ounce silver, the premiums are double. So you want an ounce of silver. First of all, I don't think you can get it, but even if you could, it would be $30. So the price of paper silver on the markets does not reflect the price of real gold and silver. And we need something of real value to be able to trade if the shit really hits the fan. and people don't want dollars, and you can't get goods and services. We're going to have to come together. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of America. A lot of people will probably die from the virus. So we need to try our best to, quarantine, stay inside, not spread the virus. But at the same time, somehow, some way, we need to come up with an exit plan. So here's my espresso shot of truth. I usually do a shot of truth where I take a shot of liquor and I express some opinion. Oh, so it's an espresso shot of truth. Express. but but this time I'm just going to take a little shot of this coffee. I'm actually drinking the Death Wish coffee, which is a lot like espresso. Very good. I'm not affiliated with them. I just like their product. It's good, strong coffee if you like that kind of thing and you need to talk fast for an hour. It will help you with that as well. Living proof of that. So my espresso shot of truth for today is I don't want you to panic. Don't panic. Like I said, it's not the end of America. We, the people, we own this country. We own its wealth. It belongs to us. It doesn't belong to the media. It doesn't belong to the elites. It doesn't belong to any political party. And we have rights, and that does not stop. We are relinquishing some of our rights to protect our health, but don't ever forget, we cannot give up those rights for good, just out of fear. So we have to come together. We have to work together as a country. No one else is going to do it for us. We're not servants to the government. They are servants to us. Again, I want to say thank you for watching. This is the first Sober News. We'll see how it comes out. Maybe people like me better drunk. I don't know. But it's interesting to me to help get some opinions and my message out there. Also for promoting my company, Intox-Detox. And, we have some awesome products for people to solve all kinds of problems. Even if you don't drink, you just want to boost your immune system. We've got that great new product, Immune Strong. Go to our site, www.intox-detox.com. Again, the coupon code is Sober News. I didn't set it up yet, but I will try to post it in the comments. That'll be good for 48 hours. So you can go grab some discounted products from our site, which is www.intox-detox.com. Again, I'm a B from Intox-Detox. This has been a April Fool's Day version of drunk news, which is called Sober News. I default to drunk news, but in this case, it's Sober News. And hey, if people like this, if it goes well, maybe we'll get some guests and we'll do more Sober News. Life is a balance. You got to have some sober news and some drunk news. Probably more sober news than drunk news, but it's a balance. We need a little bit of both. So be safe, keep your family safe, and best of luck to all. And we hope to see you soon. AB out.